Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kerzner.
Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul Kerzner. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now, and I want to thank you for joining us today. The theme of this podcast is dancing into presence. Dancing is an amazing presence tool, one that anyone can use at any time. It is my pleasure to present the guest host for today, AJ Germano. AJ is a visionary for the transformational movement. He's a community leader, and he's also an ecstatic dance and drum circle facilitator. I'm really happy to have AJ here, and I'd like him to introduce himself, give a little background as to how he got involved into the many different things he's doing, especially with dance, and some of the projects that he's working on. So AJ, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, everybody. So grateful to be here today. I guess I'll just start off by talking about my childhood and kind of what led me to dance. So I had a lot of judgment growing up around dance, and I remember going to high school dances and only being able to do the slow dance and just having a lot of judgment that would come up, and that just kind of stayed that way all the way until, I became 21 and I started experimenting with different psychedelics and ecstasy being the main one, going out to, the rave scene. And I remember the first rave I went to, and somebody gave me a pair of glow sticks, and I just went, really got present, basically. I didn't really realize that's what was happening in that moment, but I developed this story around that, though, that I actually needed to take substances in order to have those experiences. So that, stayed that way. I always felt like I had to have a drink, in order to go out and to loosen myself up. And I ended up, creating a lot of wreckage in my life, getting in a lot of trouble, getting kicked out of my parents' house. And there came a point where I actually went to rehab and decided coming out of rehab that I was going to join the military in order to, just kind of run away from my problems. And obviously that doesn't really work. But, I drank a lot while I was in the military and continued to do, what I thought was allowing me to reach those states of presence. And I actually got in so much trouble in the military that I was kicked out, and I had to serve 14 months in prison in a military brig. And while I was in there, I got in more trouble, and I actually got put into solitary confinement. And that's where I discovered how to escape, and I did that by dancing. I started beatboxing in my cell, and then I just started moving, and I was able to basically like time warp through my whole day. I was just able to completely escape, and that was my first experience with that. And when I got out of the solitary confinement, I got a radio, and I had my own cell, and I would, put a piece of paper over the window so nobody could see me, and I would just dance for hours. And it was so beautiful. And I come out of my cell just completely drenched in sweat. People would be like, what did you just do? I was like, I'm dancing, man. You should try it. And so, yeah, that was my first experience being sober and entering into that flow state. And when I got out, I kind of lost touch with that, and I didn't really know where I could go to do that. And eventually I got, suckered into going to a rave and just started the whole cycle again. And it got to a point where I was completely, beaten, and I got sober again, and I stumbled upon this documentary on Netflix, or I would think it was Hulu, and it was called Electronic Awakening. And it was all about the history of electronic music and the rave culture and how it started, and then all the way through the points of, where the task force on raves, kicked in, and all these warehouses started getting, raided, and a lot of the people that were involved at that point were really, just taking advantage of people and selling a lot of drugs, and it lost sight of really the original intention was, to come together as a community and to have this, this feeling of ecstasy together. And so, this documentary also talked about what electronic music actually does to your brain, how it uses different theta waves, and scientifically can actually put you into these states of trance without any, chemicals or substance. And then the documentary, led into where the rave scene actually moved into after the raids started happening, all over the country. Before there was ever internet, people started going out into nature, and they would bring DJs, they'd bring all their sound, they'd invite all their community, and on every full moon they would gather and they would have these amazing spiritual experiences together out in nature. And then the documentary mentioned ecstatic dance, and I had never heard, that term or what that was, and it just briefly mentioned it, and it inspired me to just type in ecstatic dance in Arizona. And there was a group that was meeting in Tempe, and this was about 4 years ago. And I went, and there was about 10 ladies in their 40s and 50s and a couple older gentlemen. I was probably like 15 years, maybe 10 years younger than everybody there, but there was just such a lack of judgment, basically no judgment at all. And these people were all dancing their hearts out, through the rhythms that the mix would take us on this journey together. And we'd go through all these emotions, basically, stepping into like playful energy, and then more of like a staccato, earthy feeling of energy, and then into that chaos, the anger, letting all of that out, and then that joyous energy, that uplifting, and then ending with stillness. And it was like going through this whole process, this journey of emotions, and having that same feeling of ecstasy and oneness, all without mind-altering substance. And ever since my first experience doing that, I was completely hooked. It was all the way out in Tempe, and I lived in Peoria, and I literally drove 45 minutes every Sunday. It became like my church. I was able to connect with this loving community that wanted nothing from me other than to just completely love me and support me. And since the first day I showed up, I shared my story, and everybody was in tears, including me. And it was like I was home. I had found my tribe, and this is like my second family now. And from there, I just became completely inspired to share this feeling and this experience with as many people as I could, especially people in my situation. I come from this background of drug abuse and raving, and I know so many people that are just completely lost in that world, and they're so close to realizing the potential, of their potential without having to use these substances. So I ended up going to the movement facilitator training about 3 years ago. And from there, I started my own ecstatic dance. And we've changed, through many locations. And eventually I met one of my previous mentors, Andrew Ecker, and he had taken me under his wing, and I became completely hooked to service. The feelings that I got from just giving of myself without anything expecting in return, and showing up to assisted living communities, working with the physically and mentally handicapped, and just drumming with them, and we'd also dance. And this is something that our ancestors have done for tens of thousands of years. Like ever since we were able to create fire, we were dancing. And this is like a universal language. You don't need to speak the same language to dance with somebody else. You can have the same exact experience that people were having 10,000 years ago here today. This feeling of euphoria of a tribe. It's so raw, and it just takes you back to when times were so much simpler. And it just allows you to be completely present in those moments, because what I've noticed, especially with people that aren't comfortable dancing, is there's a lot of judgment that comes up. It's the judgment of self. And when you can let go of that, that's when you're able to enter into that presence, that flow state. So, that's what I'm always trying to teach people how to do. And I even do it in a symbolic way. When we all introduce ourselves, I have everybody put their hands in front of their mouths, say the word judgment, and throw it away, because it's such a strong energy that keeps us from being present. And when we can let go of that, it's so beautiful, the experience that we can have. And it just translates into everything that we do in life, through drumming, through dancing, through having a conversation with somebody. When you're being present, it's like your spirit is actually being channeled through you, and your spirit is the one that's having the experience, instead of the ego and the mind that's always trying to create fear and worry and all these problems. When you're able to be present, you can actually manifest and have somebody speak some truth to you that you really need to hear. And it's not that person that's saying it, it's actually the spirit, is what I found. So, that's just kind of my story in a nutshell.
Oh, that's some story. That really is. And I think there are a lot of people out there that can relate to some of the things that you've been through, specifically using substance to escape out of the present moment. And what I've found is that people tend to do that because their present moment is so painful that anything feels better than being there in that here and now moment. I talk a lot about acceptance of the present moment, and I understand that there is a duality there, because it's a lot easier for people to escape out of an uncomfortable present moment than to actually accept it for what it is. I think the beauty of ecstatic dance, or dance in general, and using it as a presence tool, is that there is an ultimate acceptance if you can get past that ego state, that judgment. The judgment, which is based in fear, is always going to pull you out of the present moment. It will force you to ruminate on past memories. It will create future worries, and it will prevent you from really enjoying that moment for what it is. Let me ask you this. When you're hosting these ecstatic dance ceremonies, events, and you see people kind of struggling, trying to get out of their shell, but they're too scared, what is it that you tell them? What do you do with them? How do you get them to kind of release a little bit and enter into that present moment without any judgment, aside from the brief exercise that you have everyone do in the beginning?
Right. So the modality that I've discovered that's really been very powerful in ecstatic dance lately, it's called contact improv. And so I feel like connection is something that people are really lacking when they do get into that fear state. They're kind of isolating mentally. They're getting stuck in their minds, and they're not connecting with the outside. And I've actually read that the main cause of human suffering is disconnection, and it's so true in my own life. When I've struggled with having these cravings or substances, if I ever pull back and I think about where my mind's at, I'm isolated. I'm not connected to people, and so it's very important to try to connect with other people when you're in that moment. So what I usually do to pull somebody out of that is I'll just start with eye contact, just to make some simple eye contact, and that's really your first point of connection. And so you're pulling them out of their minds, and then you can kind of start at their energy. Where are they at? And match them. And then you can, slowly build them up. So maybe just matching their facial expressions, and then, maybe get a little grin. And, you'll notice that they grin a little, and then it's like a temperature gauge, right? You just slowly increase the temperature until they're where you want them to be, in the heart space of love. And then if they're open to it, I'll actually, make contact. And I actually do a contact improv workshop, sometimes before the ecstatic dance, to give people the concepts of connection. And it's very organic. There's no choreographed movements. It's really just exploring contact with these different concepts, so you can be connected to somebody and either roll with the point of connection, you can slide with the point, you can pivot on the point, you can push against the point, or you can pull the point. And so you can be connected with your feet, you can be connected by your shins. I've had about 30 people pressing into the center, and it's just this amazing experience of oneness. Because when you're pressing into somebody like that, you can literally close your eyes and feel their body as if it's yours. You're connected energetically. And so when you do that, it forces you so much to be present, because you're not thinking about anything. You're only focused on that point of connection and what it feels like. And you're just constantly exploring that. You're moving that. And, it gets really fun when you can get like 3 people going, and then you get those 3, and then you collide with another 3. And it feels almost like you're fractaling out, like on the molecular level. So you're becoming like the atom, and, you're pressing into this molecule where you are just an electron and everybody else is this electron. And I just tell people to try to get to the nucleus, to press to the center. And as soon as you get to the center, you're no longer in the center. And so you just press back to the center, and it turns into this really playful, organic energy experience. And it's really fun. So you can have all types of different energy. You can explore a really playful energy with somebody, where you're just kind of frolicking around and having fun. Or you can have like a really intimate energy, like a really sensual experience with somebody. And one of my favorite experiences, though, and this might sound crazy, but I like dancing with other guys, right? Because it turns into this really masculine, like, you can let out some really intense energy, but you're not hurting each other, but you're really like throwing your body really hard into each other. And it really just loosens all those atoms up. You're just banging against one another. And it's almost like wrestling, but instead of hurting each other, you're trying to like help each other. So it's really fun. And I've actually seen at last Neo Tribal, there was somebody doing contact improv with their dog, and the dog would like leap up against them. It was the most tribal like thing I've ever seen in my life. So
I think there's a real need at this point in our evolution to do and experience more tribal activities. You make a really good point of the disconnection. From my stance, in the very beginning, the first stage to alleviate the disconnection is to create the connection to the self, to the present moment. Because when we're in the present moment and we're setting aside all of those thoughts, those worries, those fears, everything else becomes possible. And so it really sounds very amazing, the experience that you're describing. And I think that everyone listening, and really everyone in our society, should have these kind of experiences often. Yeah. It will break down a lot of boundaries that we've created to protect ourselves, quote unquote, that have created more space between ourselves.
I would love to speak on that. Contact improv is so beautiful to watch the old programming be let go. Touch has had such a negative connotation and what that means in our society. Usually what it means is, where is this going to lead? Like, is this going to turn into sex? And the space I create, I make sure that everybody is on the same, level as far as having the safety to be able to say no to somebody. If you're not feeling the energy between somebody, you don't make eye contact. And, and as the person that's trying to connect with other people, but it's not, happening for them, it's also an opportunity for them to learn how to deal with rejection, right? And I tell people, It's not that that person's rejecting you, it's that they're saying yes to themselves. And that's something to celebrate. A lot of times people, they have so much trouble saying no, or maybe you're in a dance and now you're not feeling the energy. So you can change your mind. You don't have to dance with that person if you're not feeling it. So there's so many different ways that this experience helps translate into our own lives to help us, be able to say no in life, or be able to change our mind if we're not, liking the decision or the commitment that we've made, and then also being able to say yes.
Exactly.
and asking for what we want and doing that.
And at the heart of it all, like if you're in that moment, you're going to be connected, you're going to be seeing things clearly, you're going to be in touch with your feelings and your thought space. You're not going to be bombarded with, again, fears, right, which is really, from my stance, one of the greatest detractors of presence that we face every single day. Mm-hmm. With all that being said, AJ, I really want to thank you for taking time today, for joining us on the podcast. I do believe in my heart that dance is one of the quintessential presence tools, and it should be used and it could be used by anyone at any time. And I hope that you introducing some of these concepts, contact dance, ecstatic dance, not everyone's heard about these things. So now people have an opportunity to maybe do a little Google searching, maybe ask around, maybe look on Meetup and have these experiences, really. So I do wholeheartedly thank you for sharing your story. Again, I think there's a lot of people that can relate to it. And there's a lot of honesty there, and that's really great. If people are interested in learning more about you, connecting with you, how would they go about that? And what are some events that you're going to be hosting?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to share. So the thing I've been putting a lot of my energy into lately is this new event called Phoenix Tribal Nights. And we, instead of partying, we're actually gathering to celebrate life, right? And there's a different theme every month. And this month we're going to be celebrating community. So there's a very large community here in Arizona, made up of yoga instructors and sound healers and Tai Chi and breath people and flow arts people, ecstatic dance, drum circles. So we're going to have all these different workshops on the same night, all on July 29th from 5:30 to 2 a.m. And the night will kind of progress into movement workshops, and then we'll have live DJs. And there'll be two different rooms. There's going to be the movement playground, which will be the high energy movement, and then the restorative tank, or the decompression tank. And in there we're going to have, live jam bands, and it's going to have a really big cuddle pit with tea lounge, and we're going to have all sorts of amazing elixirs and kava, cacao, really healthy food. So just implementing everything that we've learned from living a healthy lifestyle and offering all these different ways to enter into presence, into the flow. And, from that, we plan on, moving into the festivals, and then hopefully, in the near future, we'll be able to own our own land and have our own community and be able to do this every day and just take care of each other, grow our own food, everything that we all want. So that's on July 29th. You can find out more information on my Facebook page. If you just type in Arizona Ecstatic Dance, there's a Facebook group that I post many conscious gatherings to, from potlucks to study groups. I facilitate this really magical experience with families. I call it my family wellness dance. So it's, again, dancing, but if you have little ones, you can get them into this at a really young age. We just do exercises and games that embody, a different theme. So it could be gratitude, and how would you express gratitude with movement, and, what are you grateful for, and expressing that with movement. And there's all these different games that we play. So all that information, again, can be found on Arizona Ecstatic Dance Facebook group. You can also, if you're not on Facebook, go to Meetup and just type in the same thing, Arizona Ecstatic Dance, and there's a calendar with all of our gatherings there. I think that's all I got.
Great. Well, again, AJ, thank you so much. I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to welcome everyone back into the present moment.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.